Mahi placed her hand on Ranvir's eyes, rose a little above her elbows, and slowly started moving towards Ranvir's lips. Ranvir had been waiting for a long time to feel Mahi's soft touch on his lips. Then Mahi kissed Ranvir's cheek and pushed him away. Ranvir touched his cheek with surprise and looked at Mahi, who was standing far away, who was smilingly showing him her thumb. Mahi said to him, "Now you won't be able to catch me, Ranvir." Ranvir said to him, "Mahi, I'll show you right now." When Mahi saw that Ranvir was coming to catch her, she quickly started running away from him. But after a while, Ranvir suddenly grabbed Mahi by the waist and picked her up. Mahi's back was towards Ranvir. Mahi said to herself, "Ranvir, leave me, put me down." Ranvir took Mahi and threw her on the sofa, and said to her, "Now run and show me." Mahi was looking at Ranvir while making a face. She smiled and said, "You know, I don't know how to kiss." "Then why do you bother me again and again?" Ranvir said to Mahi, while tolerating her pink soft cheeks, "You'll have to learn." Mahi looked at her and said, "Yes, this is the only thing left in the world to learn." Ranvir grabbed her cheeks, bought her face and said, "Of course, you don't even know the art of romance. That's why I want you to learn how to make your husband happy." Then he said in a seductive tone, "But I like what you do, darling. And slowly you'll learn more." Mahi asked in a confused tone, "What?" Ranvir said in a mischievous tone, "What I know." After saying this, Ranvir kissed Mahi's earlobe and started kissing her neck. Mahi's hands were tolerating Ranvir's hair. Now they were both lost in each other when someone rang the doorbell, which made Mahi's eyes go to the main door. She tried to keep Ranvir away and said, "Ranvir, someone's outside." But Ranvir didn't seem to hear anything Mahi said. Mahi called out to him, and he lifted his face and looked at her. Mahi said again, "Someone's outside, I guess." Then the doorbell rang again, which irritated Ranvir and he got up. Before he could open the door, he looked at Mahi's condition. He stood Mahi up and fixed all her clothes. Then he fixed her hair, and cleaned the lipstick around Mahi's lips with a finger. After fixing Mahi's condition, Ranvir went to open the gate. When Ranvir opened the door, a 27-year-old married girl was standing in front of him. She was holding a food tray in her hand, which was covered. That girl started laughing when she saw Ranvir's face. So she put her face down and started trying to control her laughter. Seeing Ranvir's face, she understood what was happening here a while ago. Actually, Ranvir had fixed Mahi's condition, but he forgot to fix his condition. His hair was scattered, and there were lipstick marks around his lips, which Ranvir forgot to clean. Ranvir started looking at that girl with strange eyes. So that girl said while controlling her laughter, "I am Kanika, Mahi's sister-in-law. I live in the neighborhood. Is Mahi inside?" Ranvir, who was standing in front of the gate, said while moving aside, "Yes, Mahi is inside. Come." Kanika looked at Ranvir once again and went inside while controlling her laughter. Ranvir started thinking while waving his hand in his hair, "Am I looking so funny? Or does she have the disease of laughing like this?" Mahi also had to fix her sari by then. As soon as she heard Kanika's voice, she hugged him happily. "Sister-in-law, you?" Kanika asked Mahi's head, "How are you, my dear? Did you miss us or not?" Mahi said happily, "I am fine, sister-in-law. How are you? And how is my laddu? You didn't forget me, did you?" Kanika put the tray on the table and said, "I am fine and your laddu is also fine. He misses his aunt a lot." Then Ranvir also came there. As soon as Mahi pointed at Ranvir and said, "Sister-in-law, he is my." Then looking at Ranvir's face, Mahi's laughter disappeared from her face. She made a sad face and said, "Sister-in-law, I will just come. I had some work with him." Saying this, she took Ranvir in a room while pulling his hand. Ranvir didn't understand what Mahi was doing. After reaching the room, Ranvir said to Mahi, "Mahi, what are you doing? Let your sister-in-law go once. Then we will continue all this again." Mahi took him in front of the dressing table and told him while showing his face, always don't think about anything wrong. And look at yourself first. Ranbir looked at his face in the mirror. Then he understood that Mahi's sister-in-law was laughing so much after seeing him. Ranbir also said normally. Yes, so what happened? It's just lipstick. What's the big deal in this? It often happens while kissing. It's not a big deal. Hearing this, Mahi bowed her head. Then she said while staring at him, Sister-in-law, what will you think about me? Ranbir held his waist and approached him and said while smiling, yes, so you must have understood that his sister-in-law and his brother-in-law were kissing. That too with full passion. Mahi tried to push him and said, don't you feel ashamed? It doesn't mean that I am shameless like you. You quickly clean it and come out. Saying this, Mahi pushed Ranbir and went out of the room. Ranbir saw him going out laughing and shook his head. Then he went to the washroom. Mahi came and sat next to Kanika. Kanika smiled and said, looks like Nandu loves me a lot. Hearing Kanika's words, Mahi bowed her head while feeling shy. Kanika smiled and said, it's good that our dear sister-in-law has got such a loving husband. Mahi smiled and said, yes, sister-in-law, he loves me a lot and takes good care of me. Sister-in-law, my in-laws are also very nice. Kanika lovingly waved her hand on his head and said, stay happy like this, my dear. Then Ranbir also came and sat on the sofa. He had washed his face here and had set his hair properly. Then Kanika removed the cloth from the tray and said, now both of you have breakfast quickly. Saying this, she started pouring tea in the cup and kept the breakfast plate in front of him. After their breakfast, Kanika said, you both have dinner at our house at night and if you need anything, let me know. Mahi hesitated and said, sister-in-law, you don't worry so much. We will manage. Kanika shouted lovingly and said, Mahi, you are not being too formal. Before marriage, you used to make me do things of your choice. Then she spoke lovingly and said, Laro, new relationships are formed after marriage, but old relationships never break. The feeling of love in them never changes. Then she heard a voice from behind, yes, sister-in-law, I also want to say that old relationships should never break. Everyone's eyes went to the side where Jayant was standing with a 1-year-old child in his lap and a 4-year-old girl was holding his feet and was looking straight ahead. When Jayant looked at everyone like this, he said, these two were insisting on coming here, so I brought them. Ranvir said with his eyebrows raised, speak straight, you should have come here. When the girl saw Mahi, she came running to him and sat on his lap and said, Aunt, I missed you, where did you go? Mahi said with a smile, I went to my in-laws. Then she pointed at Ranvir and said, with them. That little girl started looking at Ranvir and said while thinking, who is this? Mahi said with a smile, Anya, this is my husband and your uncle. Go to them. On Mahi's request, Anya got off Mahi's lap and went to Ranvir and spread her hands and started pointing at her to sit on her lap. Ranvir found Anya's behavior very cute. He sat her on his lap with a smile. Anya touched Ranvir's face with her small hands and looked at Kanika and said, Mom, I also want a husband. I want to go to Chuchulal. Everyone laughed at her words. Ranvir pinched her cheeks and said, and why do you want to go to Chuchulal? Anya pointed at her cheeks and said, because I have to go to school here. Teacher gives a lot of homework, that's why. Ranvir said with a smile, but your aunt has to go to college even in her in-laws' house. And she has to study too. Because studies are important. Anya looked at Mahi and Mahi nodded her head. So Anya put her hand on her head and said, then what's the point? I have to study here and there. So going to Chuchulal is cancelled. Saying this, she got off Ranvir's lap and sat next to Kanika. Ranvir found her words very cute. Mahi had Anya's younger brother in her lap whom Mahi was feeding very lovingly. And Jayant was looking at Mahi very lovingly. As soon as Ranvir looked at Jayant, he got up and sat next to her and put his hand on her shoulder and said, so brother-in-law, let's go for a walk. Saying this, Ranvir put all his weight on Jayant's shoulder. because of which poor Jayant was completely shaken. He smiled again and said, "No, I am not feeling well. I will go home and rest. See you at home at night." Ranvir saw him with confusion. So he tried to remove Ranvir's hand from his shoulder and said, "Kanika is my sister-in-law. My elder brother's wife. And we live in the neighborhood." Then Kanika stood up and said, "Okay, now let's go. See you at night." Saying this, as soon as he wanted to adopt Anya's brother, that little baby put her head on Mahi's shoulder and told her that she is not in the mood to go right now. Then Mahi said, "Sister-in-law, let her stay here. I will drop her later." Kanika refused and said, "Oh, you will get worried." Mahi said, "No, sister-in-law. I won't get worried. Anyway, I am seeing her after a long time." Kanika said yes and left with Anya. Jayant was sitting there and looking at Mahi. Seeing her, Ranvir wanted to break her face right now. But they were his in-laws. So he was somehow controlling his anger. Ranvir said forcefully in his voice, "Brother-in-law, you were not feeling well. If you are fine now, then let's go out somewhere." Saying this, he forced Jayant to go with him. Mahi saw both of them going. So she said to herself, "Jayant is not feeling well. I am sure Ranvir must have taken Jayant for treatment." Then she started playing with Anya's brother again. Now only Ranvir knew what treatment he was going to give her. What is Ranvir going to do with Jayant? To know more, keep listening to this story only on Love Pulse Diaries.